Okay, so thank you all for this workshop, especially Roberto, Adele, and Luisa for putting this together. And today I will not speak about the scientific aspect of observing, but the political dimension that I think it's equally important sometimes. So as you may know, Chile is today a center global for astronomy. Some numbers mention that in a couple of years, basically when the Vera Rubin Observatory is complete, the country will host approximately 70% of the surface of observation in the world. Others dispute this number because the calculation was made considering mirrors bigger than 4 meters. But even in that case, the country will host approximately half of the observational surface of the planet. Either case, for a small country, it is a lot. So how did this happen? And then we have to go to the 1960s to understand multiple and simultaneous international agreements through which we can draw the trajectory that brings Chile to a special place in astronomical observation. Of course, there are some geographical features. We all know that, right? Clear skies, stable atmosphere, the lack of turbulence, low humidity, etc. But geography or atmospheric conditions were not all that was at stake here. There is a political story behind this situation that allows us to understand how this happened, beyond offering the location for the observatories. So this story began in the 60s, actually in the late 1950s and early 60s, when Europeans, Americans, and Soviets went to Chile to build massive observatories in the country. And this country had scarce experience in astronomy or in dealing with international parties for producing science. In fact, by then, in the 60s, there were no studies in astronomy in the country. There were two universities, the State University and the Catholic University, and each one of them ran historical observatories. The first one, the State University, ran the National Observatory that was built with an equipment an American mission took to the country in the mid-19th century. The second one, the Catholic University, ran the formerly known as the Southern Station of the Lick Observatory from California. So, and one of the major problems of these observatories in the mid-20th century was that there were no astronomers to run them. One of the solutions was to appoint German astronomers. I honestly don't know why Germany, but I will figure that out. So these Germans went to Chile to take this position. So as I was saying, but by the mid-20th century, this was the situation, which had changed very little. There were 3 or 4 so-called astronomers, and that was all. This is to make clear that when I say the country did not have any experience in astronomy, I'm not exaggerating. It was very scarce. So the arrival of these international parties in the 60s was critical for astronomy in Chile. It was very important for global astronomy as well, but it was crucial for the development of astronomy in a small country such as Chile. So in the early 60s, AURA, the Association of Universities for Research of Astronomy, an American institution, led the project of building a Southern Observatory. They got in touch with the director of the Chilean National Observatory, Federico Rutland, due to the International Geophysics Year. That was the frame that got them in touch. And this man, Rutland, as soon as he was appointed director of the observatory, had the dream, the plan, of taking Chilean astronomy to the next level. There was a famous discourse there in which he stated this. But a small, poor, undeveloped country had other priorities for spending money. This is why the international dimension was very critical for this. So when the Americans got in touch with the director of the observatory, this began to change. Americans needed a partner in the country, and the natural institution for playing that part was the National Observatory, obviously, as precarious as it might be. Soon they launched the site testing program led by Jürgen Stock, a German astronomer working for AURA, with several connections with European astronomers. At the same time, or more or less at the same time, this is also the site testing made by Jürgen Stock in the area of Coquimbo. So at the same time, or more or less at the same time, Europeans had recently created ESO, the European Southern Observatory, and they were looking for places to build their own observatory in the south. As they said in the carte de janvier, that is like the birth certificate of ESO, they say, they were planning to go to South Africa. And actually, they began their site testing there. When they found out about the American plans of building an observatory in Chile, they said that that project would have little influence on the development of ESO. And then they actually began the site testing in Karoo in South Africa. However, 2 years later, they changed their plans and went to Chile. Stock results were impressive, and the negotiations with the local authorities in Chile seemed to be easier than in South Africa, dealing with many internal affairs, and well, starting with by then 10 years or so of apartheid. But those were not the only international parties in Chile. Soviet astronomers from Pulkovo Observatory were also developing agreements with the State University of Chile. The university had the autonomy to deal with international parties and did not need explicit government approval. A government that was highly connected with the US and deeply anti-communist, because we are, of course, in a Cold War world. So, of course, Americans knew about these agreements, and the ORA board expressed deep concern about Soviet astronomers working with the Chileans. And, of course, they had the plans to build their own observatory approximately 100 kilometers north of Santiago. That is the picture you're seeing right now. So at this point, ESO started negotiations with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile. According to ESO records, they needed to secure the investment if they were to build an observatory there. In 1963, the international agreement was ratified, and one of the clauses stated that the Chilean government would sell public land to ESO near La Serena, near the area you're looking at this picture in here. And they also stated that all the scientists and qualified personnel working for ESO would have the same diplomatic status as the one stated in the Economic Commission for Latin America of United Nations. This meant ESO members would have diplomatic status and even diplomatic immunity. It also stated other prerogatives agreed with similar international parties would apply to ESO, and this indicated to a previous agreement signed with the Americans referring to tax exemption. As soon as ORA realized the agreement Chile signed with ESO, they asked, of course, for the same diplomatic status. What I'm trying to say is, as you might see, this four-party sort of game of Americans negotiating with the Chilean university and Europeans dealing with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is what basically explains the international dimension of astronomy. Europeans and Americans knew that even if they were not going to work together, each of their negotiations could potentially benefit the other. So far, we are in the years 1962 to 1964, approximately, and all negotiations refer to land, taxes, and diplomatic status. Chilean government repeatedly stated the interest of securing American and European intentions of settling in the country. And as the American reports to the Department of State of the US show, these agreements made them feel more or less secure that the serious intentions of Chileans, despite their collaboration with the Soviets. So Russians were installing a Maksutov astrograph, but they never got to deal at a governmental level. They only dealt with the university. The government refused to set an agreement involving the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with the Russians. Nevertheless, their presence seemed to be an input for Americans to convince themselves they had to stay in Chile. So for now, I will leave the history of the Soviet astronomy in Chile. That is fascinating, but will lead us to another path. But I wanted to make the point that this Cold War structure was crucial for Chile to get involved in astronomy and to make these agreements with all these parties involved. At this point, the Chilean government expressed more than once their intention of receiving an invitation to integrate ESO, although it was not clear how or when. Trying to solve the problem that no scientific collaboration would be fruitful if there were no astronomers there, in 1965, the State University opened the career of astronomy for the first time in the country. Oh, there's a slide missing. Well, never mind. So when the telescopes were about to be ready in the late 1960s, the Chilean press published several pieces on it, of course, stating it was very important to have this first-class science in the country. But one of the questions they raised was, of course, it is amazing to have this avant-garde science in the country, but what is the benefit for Chile? So the press also, by then in the 60s, the press also noticed a difference. Americans, both from Aura and from Carnegie, that by then were in the country as well, were somehow involved with Chileans. They had a scholarship program, at least, for future astronomers. But ESO seemed to be close to the Chilean environment. And now we get to the point that I think it's very important. When the Tololo, that is the Aura project, the Tololo project began as early as in 1961, with almost no astronomers in the country, as I said, the State University negotiated an important rule, the so-called 10% rule. That is, 10% of time observation in all facilities of Aura would be reserved for Chilean projects. At the time, with almost no astronomers, this rule seemed harmless, of course. And when Tololo saw first light, the 10% rule became real. But of course, it was not fully used by then. Even if it is not stated in any official document, extra official information states that scholarship programs, as well as this 10% rule, seem to be the counter offer for land facilities, tax exemption, and diplomatic status for these international projects. In 1968, an agreement with Carnegie also copied this 10% rule. At first, ESO did not incorporate the 10% rule because, as I said, this organization was dealing with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and not with the university. But later, when operations of ESO expanded in the 80s, they started to make real the plan of a massive project in Atacama, VLT, I'm referring to VLT. The revision of the 1960 agreements incorporated the 10% rule as well. This is to say that in the following decades, the same rule applied to all international observatories and every single new project in the country, even those that are currently under construction. So, I will not expand on the legal process, could be extremely arid, but that is the main point. So this has been the main setup for astronomical development, as well as for international astronomy in this southern country for decades now. This model assumes traditional ways of observing. That is, there is an observatory located somewhere in this planet, to which you have to submit a proposal and apply for time observation, whether it is direct or remote, doesn't matter. Then the submission will be reviewed by the institution and of course by peers, and you will find out if you got accepted or not. And these proposals has to give many details on the astronomical project in question. Specifically, what you need to observe, for how much time, and why. In simple terms, we can understand this as to point the telescope to a very specific celestial object or phenomena and to observe and to keep observing. And then you gather lots of data and then you go back to wherever you came from to process data and hopefully at some point write a paper. So that is basically, in very basic terms, the model today. This 10% rule that I just mentioned of time reserved for Chilean projects had a deep impact in the country. I'm sorry, this is in Spanish because it was done by SOCHIAS, the Chilean Society of Astronomy. But what it says that the 10% rule does not refer to Chilean astronomers, but to Chilean projects, which means a Chilean institution, a university, a research center, etc., has to be involved. In recent decades, this motivated astronomers from all over the world to look for a job in Chile. This meant that professional astronomers in Chile have grown approximately 400% from early 2000 to last year. Well, actually to 2019. If in the early 2000s, there were approximately 60 students of astronomy, in considering all levels of studies, now there are more than 700. So that is a major change for a country such as Chile. It is a radical change, and the 10% rule has lots to do with this transformation. But new technologies, such as Vera Rubin, a survey telescope currently under construction, will make us rethink the grounds in which astronomy articulates international agreements. Rubin will set a completely new way of observing and doing research. The survey will produce floods of data, amounts of data we have never actually seen. As far as we know today, with the telescope currently under construction, you don't necessarily apply for time because it is a survey telescope. So you get information of the whole southern sky every 3 nights, I guess it was. So the basis in which Chile has built its progress for astronomy, attracting astronomers from all over the world, will change. Of course, other telescopes will continue in operations with extremely relevant research projects, but Rubin makes us question this model for international agreements. This challenges not only the history of how a small country such as Chile negotiated its place in international astronomy, but how we understand astronomical observation. Taking the previous agreements as binding, they have come up for other ways to interpret that 10% rule. However, this has been rather strange, and it's like trying to keep the country's benefits with a project that changes the very way we think about observing. So, and to conclude, we will have enormous amount of data available for all the international community of astronomers, and scientific projects will have to decide follow-ups, and of course, where and how and when to do those follow-ups. But one of the big questions, I think, for which, of course, I do not have the answer, is how this project will relate to citizen science. If the problem now is not the lack of information, but its overload, how do we deal with that? And I think we have been many years, decades, centered in the experts, in astronomers, and now maybe citizen science, amateur astronomy, and other similar conditions will have lots to do with that. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for your fascinating talk. And there is a question by Luisa, I think.
Well, this is about your question about why the Germans. Well, I don't have an answer to this, but I have a guess. I mean, since the 20s, German astronomers were, they wanted to go south, of course, because of their problem. And at the same time, they had Zeiss. I mean, they knew how to build good telescopes. So maybe this was a sort of offer of a collaboration in a sense. I don't know. This is only very vague, but these are the two things coming to my mind in this regard.
Yes, thank you, Luisa. Yes, that is obviously could be an answer. And it's strange because this collaboration with German astronomers comes from the mid-19th century. So it's like, I don't know, Chile and Germany had lots of relations by then, international agreements and collaboration, and even, I don't know, there's in southern China, there is a colony of Germans until today. So there might be many answers, but that is certainly one of the options. Thank you.
There is a question. I mean, sorry, Christian, do you want to?
That was exactly my interpretation. These long-standing relations between and sympathy between Germany and Chile. I mean, when I was in Valparaiso and standing at the crossroad, Avenida Bismarck and Avenida Atahualpa, I had the impression that there are very close relations since long. So
yes, that is right, and yes, what you mentioned is very frequent here. It happens that crossroads of street names with German names and local names. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
Adele, do you want to ask your question? We don't hear you.
Oh, okay, yes, here I am. Thank you, Barbara. It's a really, really interesting topic, and for me, very new too, about Chile. And thank you also for the beautiful views of those observatories. So beautiful pictures. So I wanted to ask you, can you give some more detail about how the ESO approached the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and how was this process? Why deciding to approach the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? How did you? What did you find about the connections and the influence on this of the American project, of the US project? I mean, I did not grasp, yes, this passage. That's why I'm asking.
Yes, thank you, Adele. Well, it is a very complicated story, because we have many actors dealing in simultaneous way with one another. But and referring what we were talking just now, the relation of Chile with Europe was in a cultural dimension was very important. It was the place of the world that the country was looking up to, grasping models of I don't know, development, culture, arts, etc., and science as well. So, but particularly in this case, what happened is that the Americans were dealing with a state university by now, and ESO was just focused in South Africa. So when they decided to change their plans and go to Chile, it was like the state university was already taken. So who can you go to make agreements? And then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, considering this long-term relation with Europe, was of course very willing to give all the facilities and to actually encourage the Europeans to stay in the country. So if I can make it short, I think that would be kind of an answer.
Thanks a lot. There is a comment from Quanas, and then there is also David, the working, who wants to
yes, hi.
Make a comment. Conversation.
Yeah, just since we're talking about multi-messenger astronomy, it's actually quite interesting that a lot of the history of astronomy in Chile, of course, is dominated first by optical astronomy, obviously. But when I was there asking around, and actually in Germany before, in 2018, asking people and about things, it turns out that, for example, I never found evidence of this with anyone, but people who had experience with the the pioneering experiments with ground-based gamma rays in the 1960s and 70s, apparently were setting up also a detector site in the Soviet, what was the Soviet site in Chile. And I was quite impressed that, say, the Soviet the Soviets were seemed to be much more integrated in their pursuit of astronomy, where you would have different sorts of wavelengths and expertises making use of a single site in Chile, where of course the geography is what matters, but then it was used by more varieties of astronomers, whereas all these projects that we see from the Americans and the Europeans are very like wavelengths determined, and the optical astronomers are doing one thing, and for many years the radio astronomers are not that interested, and then they come from separate paths. So there's an interesting story there.
Yes, thank you, Juan Andres. It is indeed very interesting. And just to mention very briefly what you mentioned about the Soviet station that is called El Roble. As you know, in '73, there was a coup in Chile. So, and when the dictatorship took over the country, the Soviets just ran away and they left everything behind, all the equipment, everything, just like that. They ran away immediately, and the station was closed for many, many years. And at some point, some colleagues even found some containers at the main port with equipment that no one had touched. And they were looking for some of that equipment actually had to do with gamma ray research. So yeah, it is fascinating, but it's a whole other story, I guess.
Thank you very much. I will leave give the floor to David, and then we start. We don't hear you, David, I think. Yeah, your microphone is turned on, but we don't hear you. So I don't know if it's a problem of the... Maybe you can... Okay, so you can try without headphones, and otherwise we have to... Okay, I don't know, Matteo, do you have any... Okay, maybe via chat, and we go ahead via chat. Sorry for that, but there is no way. Now it's... thanks a lot, Barbara, and we go to the next speaker. The next speaker actually,